In the quiet heart of what is now East Renfrewshire lies the forgotten estate of Bargarran, a place long since swallowed by the creeping march of modern towns and roads. But in the year 1696, Bargarran was no urban sprawl. It was a lonely semi-rural outpost, an isolated estate, wrapped in mist and silence. At its centre stood the laird's house, a modest 3-storey dwelling of cold stone, home to the Shaw family. For centuries it had been simply that, a house, a hearth, a shelter against Scotland's wild winters. But for 7 long and terrible months, Bargarran became something else entirely. A theatre of nightmare, the stage for one of the darkest and most unsettling supernatural dramas in Scottish history. A tale not merely of illness and fear, but of demonic visitations, spectral violence, and the last mass execution for witchcraft the nation would ever see. It all began, as such things so often do, with a curse. On the 22nd of August 1696, Christian Shaw, the clever, sharp-witted 11-year-old daughter of the laird, caught Catherine Campbell, a household servant, stealing milk. Confronted and humiliated, Campbell turned on the child, and with fury flashing in her eyes, muttered a bitter curse under her breath. Christian also reported a strange and unsettling encounter soon after with Agnes Naismith, a local widow known for her sour temper and suspected by many of harbouring dark knowledge. Days later, the girl fell ill. But this was no common sickness of the flesh. What followed was the slow unravelling of reason, the blurring of the line between this world and the next. Christian's affliction was unlike anything of the physicians of the day or since could fully explain. She would fall into violent fits where her body stiffened like a corpse, eyes staring blankly, her tongue silenced. At times she collapsed into death-like trances, unmoving for hours. When she woke, she spoke in tongues no one recognised, or screamed of unseen tormentors, clawing at her flesh. And then the true horror began. Christian began to vomit objects, things no child could possibly have swallowed. Clumps of feathers, handfuls of straw, crooked iron pins, fragments of bone. Once, it was said, she retched up glowing coals, and another time, hot candle wax spilled from her mouth. She spoke of shadowy figures, spirits who scratched, pinched, and struck her as she lay helpless in bed. Others in the house heard the blows and the slaps, but saw no hand deliver them. Doctors, baffled and powerless, could only watch as her torments grew. Desperation drove the family to the clergy. Prayers and blessings were muttered day and night, but still Christian suffered. And then she began to name names. "The devil comes to me in the dark," she whispered, and he was not alone. Catherine Campbell, Agnes Naismith, and others. More than 20 names poured from the girl's fevered lips, each name feeding the spreading panic like dry straw to a flame. In the town of Paisley, fear became fever. Whispers of witchcraft swelled into cries for justice. Witnesses, family, servants, and visitors alike swore to chilling sights beyond reason. They told of Christian being lifted into the air by invisible hands, her stiff body floating down staircases, gliding across rooms without her feet touching the floor. On one occasion, she was seen, swept down the winding stairs of the laird's house, with such unnatural speed that no one dared to try to catch her. Her limbs hung lifeless. Her eyes stared as if at some distant horror. On the 20th of February, a stack of peat in the house's store spontaneously ignited and burned to ash, though no fire had been lit. On the 27th of February, the kitchen fireplace was found empty of ash or cinders, as though freshly swept, though no servant had touched it. And on the 14th of March, as Christian sat silent in church, she dropped her glove, and before any hand could reach for it, the glove lifted itself and floated gently back to her waiting palm, as seen by a dozen dumbstruck worshippers. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. On March the 28th, 1697, after 7 months of terror, the fits and trances ceased. Christian stood, calm and unharmed. The bloom of life returned to her cheeks. She would recover fully, live to adulthood, and later build a thriving textile business in Paisley. But not all who touched this darkness escaped its grip. Her accusations, fanned by fear and fueled by the desperate prayers of the pious, led to ruin. One of the accused hanged himself in his cell before trial. 7 others, men and women, were dragged before the court, convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death. On the 10th of June 1697, beneath a grey Scottish sky, they were hanged by the neck and their bodies burned. An end both final and pitiless. It was the last mass execution for witchcraft in Scotland. The story of Christian Shaw survives most clearly in a lurid pamphlet, a true narrative of the sufferings and relief of a young girl, published soon after the events. Full of supernatural detail and heavy with God-fearing fervour, it reads like the tales from Salem, across the sea. Later, critics branded it religious propaganda. Its authors, said to include Christian's uncle and 2 fire-breathing Presbyterian ministers, were accused of invention and exaggeration. And yet, court records, government files, and the church minutes all confirm that something happened, something very real. In the centuries that followed, many tried to unmask the mystery. Some called Christian the Bargarran impostor, a clever fraud hiding behind childhood innocence. In the 19th century, investigators claimed that they found a secret hole in the wall near her bed, perhaps used to pass her the pins, bones and feathers she disgorged in front of horrified witnesses. A 1996 study in the Scottish Medical Journal argued for medical explanations, epilepsy and conversion order, a soup of mental and physical illness misunderstood in her time. But what of the glove that floated? The spontaneous fire in the hearth? The levitations? To believers in poltergeist phenomena, these are classic signs of violent, unfocused psychic energy. A manifestation of trauma, fear or rage made real. To skeptics, they are tales stretched by panic and dark imagination. The truth, as ever, remains shrouded in the fog that still clings to old Bargarran. But this much is certain. The shadow cast by Christian Shaw has never truly lifted from Scottish history. Was she the victim of dark forces, the architect of cruel deception, or simply a frightened child caught in the deadly gears of superstition and hysteria? The question lingers, unanswered, as chilling now as it was 3 centuries ago.